of North Carolina works to advance the economic interests of North Carolina's 100 counties and our more than 10 million residents. And we do that through collaboration with state, regional, and local partners and private sector partners as well. And you can see here that we work through business recruitment, existing industry employer support, international trade, export assistance, small business startup counseling, and tourism promotion. So, you know, a lot of economic development officials over the years, you know, think of economic development in addition to tourism, but our job and our focus is that tourism is economic development. So at Visit NC, you know, who are we and what do we do? So Visit NC is part of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. We used to be with the Department of Commerce until about almost 6 years ago now. So our mission at Visit NC is to unify and lead the state's tourism marketing efforts. So we want to be a preferred destination for travelers, film productions, sports teams, and really just help our partners statewide maximize their economic vitality. And really briefly, I'm just going to go into a little bit of tourism research just so you kind of have the background. But we know that most business sales are in tourism are in industries that directly serve the visitors. But we also know that all sectors of the North Carolina economy benefit from tourism activity, either directly or indirectly. This slide is from our tourism satellite account, and we use a company called Tourism Economics to do this for us each year. This is actually 2018 data. I don't have the 19 full data set yet, but tourism demand of 32 billion generated 449 billion in business sales when you look at direct, indirect, and induced impacts. These total tourism business sales increased 6% from 2017 to 2018. So you could see, you know, the lodging, of course, is and food and beverage is what people usually think of in terms of tourism. But you could see, you know, business services and manufacturing and wholesale trade and government also are impacted indirectly in an induced manner in terms of tourism business sales. So we know that it's really important, not just to those direct tourism businesses, but really to all tourism or all businesses in North Carolina. And there are about 48,000 or so tourism businesses in North Carolina, and many of them small businesses such as yourselves. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about our organization. This is really my last slide here, but our staff is designed to encourage visitation based on the way people travel. And partnerships are really key to how we work. We have a staff of 12. And so it's a really small staff, much smaller than other tourism offices across the country. But we do work very well with each other, and we work very well with our partners across the 100 counties from the mountains to the coast. Okay, so today's agenda, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about traveler sentiment, and in particular, the sentiment of the travelers in the southern states. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in just a minute. So I'm going to give you some southern traveler information. We're going to talk about a travel index, and then I'm going to give you some U.S. level safety perceptions of travelers. And then this morning I did add a little bit of information on a new program that we're working on in collaboration with the NCRLA, or the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association, NC State Extension, and DHHS. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that at the end. If you haven't heard about it, hopefully you have, but I'm going to give you a little bit of information about that at the end. So immediately when COVID-19 began to affect the industry, several research vendors began frequent studies to understand traveler sentiment to assist DMOs, or destination marketing organizations, and tourism businesses. We've been partnering with destination analysts for 13 weeks now. They field 1,200 surveys each week, and that's of U.S. adult travelers split by U.S. geographic region. So today, like I said, I'm going to present to you data from the southern region because I feel like it encompasses our primary markets and part of our secondary markets. Now, I will say that their definition of the South is a little broader than ours is. It does include Texas, and then it goes up to West Virginia, Kentucky. So it's just a slightly larger region than what we really consider our primary and secondary markets, but really it gives you a good idea of what that Southern American traveler is thinking, and because that is our market by far, our largest market. So it's important, first of all, to understand the traveler's personal feelings about the pandemic. Therefore, this first section I'm going to go through from this destination analyst research focuses on personal feelings about the virus as it relates to travel. Personal safety concerns are still high, with 3/4 of respondents indicating that they are concerned about their safety and also that of their friends and family. And you can see here on the left chart, the concern over about friends and family has been higher really than personal safety for nearly every week except for one throughout these 13 weeks of data collection. So even though the sentiment is at its lowest in several weeks, it's still very high, with 71% of Southern travelers concerned about the safety of their friends and family and 67% concerned about their personal safety. Similarly, concerns about the national economy as a result of the situation remain high. However, concerns over personal finances took a deep decline for Southern American travelers last week. I really don't have much of an explanation for that, except to say that perhaps as things open up and some people are able to get back to work, that may have had an impact last week, where you can see that it went from 62% to 52% in terms of those who are greatly concerned about their personal finances. Expectations that the severity of the coronavirus situation to get better in the next month have fallen in the last month. So 1 month ago, 49%, nearly half of respondents indicated that they expected the situation to get worse in the next month. This week, that percentage fell to 34%. Conversely, last week, 29% expected an improvement, whereas this week, that percentage grew to 32%. So you can see that the expectations are getting better. They're very slow in changing, but they're getting better. Interesting results here too, relative to avoiding travel until the crisis is over. The question was, how much do you agree with the following statement? I'm planning to avoid all travel until the coronavirus situation blows over. So with the exception of that week of May 10th, the travelers in the South who strongly agree that they'll avoid travel until the crisis is over has steadily declined. We believe that increase the week of May 10th was due in part to several of those states opening back up early. The Georgia and South Carolina opening up early. We feel that kind of made a little blip on the radar there the week of May 10th, which is that reddish, if you see on the far left set of bars, the red one that kind of goes up before it starts going back down again. That was the May 8th through 10th survey. But things are getting better, and fewer or more people are disagreeing that they'll avoid travel until the crisis is over. The perceived safety, and I know this is a very tight slide and I apologize, but I just wanted to get it as much as possible on here. But the perceived safety in different travel activities, it hasn't changed that significantly, but we are really fortunate here in North Carolina that so many activities available in our state are perceived as lower risk, such as outdoor recreation and road trips. And these activities where you find many people congregated in a small area are perceived to have the highest risks, such as cruise lines or traveling by motor coach or attending a conference or convention. So you can see where those have a much higher perceived safety risk. More than half of the Southern region respondents expect to travel some point in the fall of 2020 and agree that they will be taking more road trips and regional trips. However, nearly half of them also responded that they will take a staycation this year instead of a summer vacation. Now, I will kind of put a caveat on that. I was on a webinar a couple of weeks ago with destination analysts, and they actually did a focus group of real travelers who had nothing to do with the tourism industry per se. And I will say to you that the definition of staycation is very subjective. For me, I think of a staycation as taking a week off work and staying in Raleigh and going to the museums or going to one of the local state parks. But for everyone, staycation does not necessarily mean that. So it was really eye-opening for me, but it can mean, maybe staying in your state and not flying somewhere for a vacation, or maybe going to the state parks in your region, and also staying in a hotel. So staycation is very subjective. So I would be, kind of be careful when we hear that people will be taking staycations rather than vacations, because it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to go stay overnight somewhere. It just means they're going to do something different and closer to home. So again, it's very subjective. So I would just, that's my caveat there for that slide. The current state of mind. Let's see, I've lost my place. My notes. Here we go. So travelers are split in their current state of mind with regards to travel. Nearly a quarter of them are either already traveling or ready to travel, but half of them say that they need more time. And if you see here, 30% need a little more time, but 16% need a lot more time before they're going to be ready to travel. So it's really, really split in terms of how they're feeling about, being ready. And safety plays a role in that destination selection as well when they're looking at leisure trips, and a very important role. So this research indicates that safety affects the choice of lodging and the choice of the destination in general. Health and safety guidelines are really important to travelers. More than half of them indicate that they'll be much more interested in a travel business such as a hotel or restaurant that clearly state that they are following their state's guidelines. So I know that this was one of your all's questions in the questions Victoria sent over early. So this is very important to state those guidelines and to follow the guidelines issued by your state government, and let your visitors know that, because it is very important to them. So the key takeaways for this top section, or this first section: while personal safety concerns haven't shifted that much, they are still high. Concerns of the national economy are still high, but expectations have grown more positive. More than half of travelers still say they're going to hold off on travel for a while until the crisis is over, or at least until it slows down. But despite everything else, the research is telling us that Americans do miss traveling, and when the time is right, they are ready to get back on the road. So when will that be? The expectations for the fall season, you can see here. More than 50% of the travelers hold out hope for the fall travel season, which was an increase of from 43% last week. And when asked about tentatively scheduled trips, the fall months have continued to see an increase, though still in the 20 to 30% range of Southern travelers. And how far will they go when they do take that road trip? This is really important to us because we need to know where to market to them, of course. But less than 400 miles is the average distance. And someone did ask me, is that one way? And yeah, that's one way. So and it's interesting, about a month ago, this was closer to 500. So I think it's interesting that as states open up and as things move along, the distance that people are willing to travel on that next road trip has actually decreased slightly. So you can see that 33%, or even more than that, 33% say that 100 to 250 miles, and 16% even less than 100 miles. So I think this is really important when we look at our marketing beginning again. Half of the Southern travelers agree that they will replace those long-haul trips with regional trips, which is also evidenced by that average distance for the trip in the previous slide. And half of Southern travelers agree that they will, I'm sorry, I've got the wrong notes there. And one of the destination types we asked, where would you be likely to visit on that next leisure trip? And I circled the small town, villages, or rural destinations was the third most popular likely destination type. So I think this is really important and really, good news for North Carolina and our small towns and rural attractions. So the key takeaways on this section: summer travel season may be challenging, but fall expectations have increased. Those road trips could bring a higher volume of travelers, and Americans in the South expect their road trip to be an average of less than 400 miles. So when we do start advertising, let's talk a little bit about advertising in the COVID world. More than half of the respondents from the South say that they're open to learning about new travel experiences. So 53% this week are excited about learning about new travel experiences and destinations to visit. So this is good news for us as we start marketing again. And what sources will travelers use when planning travel in the next 12 months? Online topped the list, including websites, online content, Facebook, in social media, email promotions, apps, internet advertising. So you could see where all these are online media. So this is really important as well. Respondents indicate that they would be receptive to travel messages via websites and, again, other digital messages. And these are really important. But we've got to be really careful how we advertise. The tone of your advertising is very important. Travelers want honest, friendly, humble, and direct tones. They do not want authoritative advertising. They want you to reassure them that you're doing what you need to do to keep them safe, but they don't want that to be the tone of the advertising. Be honest, but be friendly. And let them know you're gonna take care of them, but let them know, in an honest, in a fun, in a friendly way. Something else we need to be concerned about, though, there's a split between those those Southern residents who would be happy and those who would be unhappy to see advertisements for their home communities right now. So this should be kept in mind when beginning advertising again. It's hard to promote your community for a visitor when the residents don't want them there, and so that resident sentiment is very important. And I will add in here that at Visit NC we just launched a resident sentiment survey on travel. We just finished our data collection, and we'll have our results, in the next few weeks or so. But we really wanted to get out in the field and talk to North Carolina residents about their feelings about COVID-19 as it relates to travel. And we're really excited to be able to do that. So hopefully we'll have that information very soon. So the key takeaways here: travel ads can deliver excitement and happiness and joy, but you have to use the right methods and you have to use the right tone. Again, travelers will use online resources to plan their next leisure trip, and we need to make sure we're considerate of that local sentiment as we're advertising. So now I'm going to move on to some U.S. level data. So this does not represent Southern travelers, but all U.S. travelers, which is weighted to the U.S. population. So just a little information on a sentiment index. So a sentiment index, it helps marketers compile large data sets into a single metric. And this particular case, we'll use the destination analyst example. And so the way that they create or way they calculate this predictive index is shown here. So that you look at personal health and personal finances, openness to messaging, and the excitement visitors have to travel now. So all this data is put together into a single metric, and this is how it's calculated. So while things are improving, you can see that we're still not at a healthy stage yet. So the graph on the left shows what a healthy travel outlook would look like. So let's just say this time last year, you could see where, a very small proportion of people are not ready to travel. You've got a good proportion of people who are waiting to travel, and then even larger that are ready to travel. You can see here in our travel outlook, we're not there yet. While things are getting better, the bars on the left are getting smaller and the bars on the right are getting larger. We're still not at that healthy phase yet. So that's really important to understand is where people, where their sentiment is. They're not there yet, and this isn't over yet. However, and don't worry about reading all the lines and everything. I added this in there because it's very interesting to me this week that the highest index for those who are ready to travel were rural American travelers. So it's people who live in who self-identify as living in a rural area. Safety concerns in all the regions of the U.S. except the Midwest showed drops this week, while financial concerns showed drops most significantly in the South. The Northeast actually showed the most optimism about the situation improving in the next month. Gen X safety concerns rebounded this week, while millennials and boomers showed modest drops in concern for safety. Millennials showed a slight rise in openness to travel messaging, while both Gen X and boomers saw slight drops. So again, this is not meant for you to look at each line there, but I thought it was interesting that those rural American travelers are the highest index in terms of being ready to travel. Finally, I want to talk to you a little bit on how travelers view safety measures, because I know that that's what several of you asked about. And we're a marketing organization, but I'm going to give you as much information as I have on those safety measures. This is, again, this is at the U.S. level, so I'm going to keep that in mind. It doesn't appear that the South travelers have that many differences in this data, but this is representative of the U.S. So this data is a couple weeks old, but I thought it was still pertinent in explaining that the sentiment for upcoming travel, because as I said, this is not over, this is not going away anytime soon. You can see travelers are ready when they do get back on the road to take those sanitation supplies with them to avoid the crowds, which could be really good news for many of you. Getting out into the more rural areas and visiting farms, to avoid those crowds. They do plan on wearing face masks. More than half of them say that they're going to wear face masks, and they may not eat in. They may take out. So this is very important for us to understand as we begin marketing to them. Also, when they're researching their leisure destination prior to traveling, they're going to look at how destinations and businesses are managing the coronavirus situation before they go on their trip. You can see 3/4 of them say, yes, before my next leisure trip, I will research the destination and the businesses that I'm going to be in contact with. And even though they're researching, there's still a level of mistrust in travel-related businesses. Now, again, this data is a few weeks old, but 12% have a great deal of trust, only 12%, and that businesses will look out for their health. So we need to make sure that we're communicating properly what we're doing to protect the travelers when they're in North Carolina. Similarly, confidence is not high with regards to reopening yet. Now, this data, again, this is also a couple weeks old, so I presume that confidence is likely increase a little bit, but I would definitely keep this in mind as you begin welcoming visitors back to your attractions and your establishments. They're not all that confident yet. And again, on face masks, I thought this was interesting that Americans largely agree that people should wear face masks when they're in public. So I think that this is gonna stretch out a little bit longer, I think. So those are all the research slides I have, but as I mentioned earlier, I want to take just a minute to tell you about a collaborative public health initiative that we've partnered with the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association, DHHS, and NC State Extension, and it's called Count on Me NC. Hopefully you've heard about it, but if you haven't, I'm just gonna give you a brief rundown on it. For businesses, there are 5 COVID-19 training modules that have been developed by health officials and food safety experts. And this joint effort is geared not just for businesses, but for guests and customers as well, with a customer pledge. So there are 5 training modules. The first 3 are really geared towards food safety and aimed at restaurants or businesses that deal with food services. So that may affect some of you all, not knowing exactly who's on the webinar. Modules 4 and 5 cover general cleaning and best practices for staff and management. These are designed for all businesses. So I would say anyone can get on and do these modules. These modules are free of charge. So we really hope that that you all will look into these, and I'm going to give you some more information about how to do that. But when you do your trainings, you will receive, after you do your trainings, you will receive a business toolkit full of ways to promote that you have done the training to visitors. So visitors can be on the lookout for your Count on Me, either stickers or signs in the window or whatever it may be. There are several things in the business toolkit. So far, over 3,000 businesses have already begun taking the modules and taking the trainings. So I would encourage you to visit countonmenc.com to learn how you can participate as well. That is all I have for today, but I would be happy to take any questions. If there are any questions that you all had that I didn't get to in one way or another, I'd be happy to try to answer those as best possible, or I'd be happy to get back with you if I need to do that as well.
That's great, Marlise. Thank you so much. That was a terrific overview. So Victoria, did you and Matt want to start with some of the questions that we received, or would you prefer to start with those in the chat? Or if anyone has a question they want to pose in the chat.
Yeah, Matt and I can pull some questions that were submitted, and then while we're doing that, if people can think of questions, just put them in the chat and we'll look for those too. I think Matt was kind of following along. So Matt, do you have any of the questions you think we should ask?
Yeah, we have one on asking about pricing of products. There's an interesting question asking, will consumers expect to pay more to be safe? Do you have any idea about that, Marlise?
Yeah, I have not seen a lot of research on that. I have seen, a little bit that people will pay if it means that the safety guidelines are going to be followed, but I haven't seen that they necessarily expect to. I think that's definitely a good question, and it is one that I would be really interested in knowing more about, but I haven't seen a whole lot of data on whether they expect it. I think that they will pay more if needed. One thing about, and this is a little different, I think, than the question, but, when we look at hotels and average daily room rates and in past recessions and downturns, we have seen that when hotels and lodging establishments drop their rates too fast and too soon, that it's really hard to recover. So I certainly would pay attention to that. It's much easier to get people to come back than it is to raise that rate again. So I would be careful in dropping your rates, whatever they may be. And again, I would be careful with raising them too much, but I think that, a healthy increase is okay until I hear more from, residents. But I do know that in terms of the lodging industry, it's really difficult to bring that rate back once it drops.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat from Rhonda in Cherokee County asking, what was the demographic of respondents who didn't mind getting information online?
Well, it's weighted to the U.S. population, or that one was weighted to the southern U.S. population. So it would reflect the U.S., the South's demographics. So it would be a weighted reflection of that geographic area.
And do you have any
Rhonda
idea?
went on to,
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I interrupted you. So Rhonda went on to ask, she's curious about how many boomers were okay with obtaining information that way, so online.
I don't have that right in front of me. Again, the data is weighted in terms of splitting it out by generation level. I could definitely look into that with our research company and see if I could tease anything out of that. And Rhonda, if you want to email me, I'm happy to look into that further in terms of that generation breakdown for source of information. I'm going to write that down, but if you would want to email me directly, I'd be happy to look into that.
That's terrific. Thank you for the follow-up. Okay, Matt, I'll let you keep going.
We have another question from Andy J asking, where are the people living in rural areas wanting to travel, cities or other rural destinations?
That wasn't a question, Andy, but you could see that I think I can't pull the slide up right this second, but the slide that showed where are Southern travelers most likely to visit. I think it was the beach first. I can't remember the second one right off, but that's the small towns, the rural attractions and smaller communities was the third top place where Southern travelers were interested in visiting on their next road trip or on their first leisure trip as we come out of the pandemic. So, specifically, that's as granular as I have the data.
I believe the second one was friends and family, Marlise.
I think so. Yeah,
I'm not absolutely positive.
I think that's right. Mm-hmm.